that Viva Frei realized he had a typo in the title, because the word outrageous doesn't have a Y in it. Why not? Well, you'll just have to ask outrageous. We shall begin with a flashback to the hearings that took place after the failed assassination attempt on Donald John Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on the 13th of July, 2024.
Director, when did the FBI learn that Iran was threatening President Trump's life?
So I want to be a little bit careful here, not to talk about specific classified information, but we have been for quite some time, and I'll stick with what's in the open record. We, for some time, and I in particular for some time, have been calling out the efforts by the Iranian government to attempt to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani by going after current or former prominent U.S. officials. And we've even had an indictment against it. And I think that we need to recognize the brazenness of the Iranian regime, including right here in the United States. And I expect that we're going to see more of it, and I expect there'll be more coming on that. I'm not aware of any threat information related to protectees that wasn't, passed in a timely way, but I can't really get into specifics here.
It's minorities' time here, but I just felt that was a question the committee needed to understand, and it sounds like you've known that for a long time, and that information was conveyed to the Secret Service?
Let me pause. Before director or former director Christopher Wray starts to talk again, does the manner in which he speaks not drive you crazy? Like a mumbling zhlub? Well, what I can share with you publicly. And it's all, so. Anytime someone starts a sentence with so, not anytime. Oftentimes, they're getting ready to mislead you. Like, make no mistake, let me be clear. So, let me get my story straight before I get it out and buy an extra 3 seconds. But listen to his zhluby manner of speech.
Any information related to threats against the former president, which again, as we've sort of talked about, is happens all too often, is something that we have a whole process we routinely share with the Secret Service at a number of levels in a timely way, and to my knowledge, that has consistently been followed.
Gentlemen.
Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, yet must be lived forwards. I'm now going back and re-listening to some of the hearings that occurred in the wake of the failed July 13 Butler assassination attempt on DJT, Donald John Trump. It was a successful murder of Corey Camperatore and 2 other Americans grievously injured. I'm going back to listen to this because I'm choking on my own words here. Back when this occurred, and I remember retweeting or quote tweeting that video saying, you've got whatever he was, Deputy Director Christopher Wray of the FBI coming out and saying, we've been having consistent threats of retaliatory assassination against Donald Trump because of killing the guy there, I forget his name now, Soleimani. And yet, Thomas Crooks, a loner, weirdo teenager, managed to get onto an unsecured roof that was literally carved out of the security perimeter when Donald John Trump was giving a speech in Butler, Pennsylvania, managed to get off, I think it was 5 shots, unstopped, but not undetected. Despite being detected, no communication between law enforcement and Secret Service, who allowed Donald John Trump to get on stage when there was a known threat with a rifle and a gate, whatever the thing is, rangefinder. Director Wray gets up there and says, we've known about threats, legitimate, credible threats against Donald John Trump for a long time. And yet that was the level of inadequacy, incompetence of Secret Service on that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I said, holy crap. They're basically making a public service announcement that they are utterly, woefully incapable of protecting anybody and announcing it publicly during these hearings. And you go back and you listen to this and you start to understand things better at the time, but it's almost a year later right now. And at the time, you do recall them floating the idea that somehow there might be an Iranian connection, that somehow there might have been training, support, whatever. In the attempted assassination from Thomas Crooks, there was suggestions that the Iranians might be involved somehow. And if you were there at the time, we were talking about this at the time, and we were greatly skeptical that Iran would be involved. And we were saying, Barnes and I in particular, that this sounds like a deep state attempt to try to implicate the Iranians in this assassination attempt so that they could then go after Iran with military intervention. And I remember it clear as day. And we were talking about the fact that Mike Pompeo, for some bizarre reason, talking about becoming the vice president, even though there was zero chance of that happening if Donald John Trump were on the ticket. You have the convention in Milwaukee that I was on my way to when I found out the news of the failed assassination attempt. I was in Michigan, out for a jog with my phone on mute. And I get back and it starts going ping, 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 ping. And my wife says, did you hear what happened? We were on our way to Milwaukee for the RNC. And whether or not you agree with the theory, you can at least understand the concept. Mike Pompeo floating the idea of being VP, that never happens under a Donald John Trump ticket. And so there was, you want to write a Jean Le Carré number, you want to say you're crazy for even entertaining these ideas, go ahead. If the assassination attempt had been successful, they then pin it on Iran. You then have Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo as the Republican ticket with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as the Democrat ticket. And you have war with Iran, which had been discussed for a very long time. And but by the grace of God, a butterfly flapping its wings, Trump turns his head, and now you're left with, some might say, the patsy. Others don't even believe he was the sole shooter. I happen to believe that Thomas Crooks was the only shooter there. Call me whatever names you want. But at the time, they were floating this potential Iranian connection. And Barnes and others took it a little, had a bit of a heated Twitter exchange yesterday. Barnes puts out a tweet that I think some people not fully understanding the context of. We're going to get into the Epstein stuff in a bit. Robert Barnes' tweet, why did FBI Deputy Director Bongino, FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi shut down inquiry into Trump's assassination and refused to disclose the Epstein files? So warhorse, and I think he's talking about Ted Cruz here, we'll get to that in a second, could pretend Iran was behind the assassination attempts, and so the world wouldn't know how Epstein worked with Israel. I saw people in response to this tweet saying, Viva, don't you acknowledge the vile anti-Semitism of Robert Barnes? We'll get into that in a second. I love it when people try to Jew shame me. Oh, Viva, we're going to be on the same train car when they come for us. Like, first of all, you're damn right, and I know it. So maybe you should listen to what I'm saying with that in mind. I'm not saying it to buy any good graces with the likes of the people who would put me on the train. We'll both be on the train. At least I'll have a clean conscience in having stuck true to what I thoroughly and honestly and sincerely believe. The Iranian connection. The argument was never that Iran was actually training Thomas Crooks. In fact, all of us were very skeptical even at the mere suggestion of it. The argument was, in fact, my personal belief, unsubstantiated or, in my view, substantiated as it may be, is that Butler, Pennsylvania was a Lee-hop or a me-hop, and you had your useful idiot, Crooks, who was training, firearms training at ranges with other trained professionals who could identify lone psychopaths who are at a firing range on certain holidays, they're alone, and bizarre-looking kids. Set that aside. Leave the best perch from which to shoot open and unsecured by some miracle of all miracles in the most sinister of senses, and maybe the idiot gets his shot off. I think it might have been more of a remove Trump from the ticket deep state operation, but not Iranian-backed at all. The Iranian angle was just a pretext for the American military-industrial complex to justify a war with Iran. The fact that we haven't heard much from that Butler, Pennsylvania, and some of us are, questioning whether or not it's been closed, in quotes, however you can close these things. I said it from the beginning of the Maria Bartiromo interview with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. I didn't get the impression from what they stated that, I think Bongino said there's no there. I didn't get the impression that was writing off case closed, nothing to see. I understood that as being, if there is a there, you will hear about the there when we talk about it. Some people misunderstood as that meaning that the Butler investigation is closed. Still ambiguous, and I've put out my questions publicly for public answers, and we'll see. But the bottom line was that the argument that Crooks might have had an Iranian connection. I mean, we know that the second guy there, Ruth, had a Ukrainian connection. We'll see who's exploring that. Was a pretext. And that is the underlying point of what Barnes was getting at, that if Secret Service comes out and says, yeah, Frickin' Crooks had no connection to Iran. The Ted Cruzes of the world lose the ability to argue, well, the Iranian connection, potential assassination attempts, at least with respect to July 13 Butler assassination attempt. And I mean, if you haven't seen the clip, I'll just I'll reiterate it, replay it, because it's the one that went viral yesterday that caused a bit of uproar, because it doesn't make Ted Cruz look particularly good. And a lot of people are saying it doesn't make Tucker Carlson look particularly good because he's engaging in gotcha journalism and not sincere journalism. Here. I don't think it's gotcha journalism. I mean, yes, Tucker Carlson is particularly sassy, snarky, argumentative. But you know what the best retort to that is? Knowing what you're talking about and having the information on hand. This is the clip that went viral. And I'll pause when we get to the potential attempt to connect Crooks and Butler to Iranian attempts to assassinate Donald Trump as a pretext/justification to strike Iran now.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, this is like two quasi-alpha males headbutting. You know what, Ted Cruz? I don't know offhand. I have a rough idea, give or take. I mean, I'm sure some people were saying like Ted Cruz didn't want to give a number because if he's off, it'll be a gotcha. If he were off by 10 million, I think people would have forgiven him. If he had said about 100 million, it's pretty damn big. You know, the size of, what was Brazil? No, Brazil's much bigger. Give or take 80 to 100 million, just to have an idea. It's definitely not, it's not like 5 million. It's not Minnesota. It's not 1.6 billion like China or India, but I think they might be closer to 2 billion now. Had he been within 10, 15%, nobody would have had an issue. And had he said, yeah, it's very big, I don't know the exact number, people might not have had an issue. It's the arrogant pomposity. Say, yeah, I don't know. What are you going to do about it? I'll play it. I'll shut my big mouth. Sorry.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
No. Like, why would
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah.
How could you not know that?
Look at Tucker has.
I don't sit around memorizing.
Tucker has the perfect face of perpetual faux surprise. Like, okay, it's I look. If you're Ted Cruz or you're a Ted Cruz supporter, you don't like this. If you're a Tucker Carlson hater, you don't like this either. From an argumentative, purely analytical perspective, this is glorious to watch.
Rising population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Well,
if you had said that, then that would have been a different discussion. If you had said 80 million, he's like, no, it's 92. Close enough for the purposes of strategy.
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even. You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the one who can't figure out if it was a good idea to kill General Soleimani, and you said it was bad.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe that...
We're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them. But
look at Tucker's face. I'm surprised again.
We're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting Israel.
High stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Okay. Nobody could like the way that went if you like or dislike any of those two, but falling back on the Iranian threat to Donald Trump as some sort of ex post facto, or I'd say retrospective excuse to justify the strikes of Iran. And that is where Butler, Pennsylvania becomes relevant, because at the time it was being floated as who might be behind this. And if it's revealed that Iran was never behind Crooks and his attempt on that day, then at the very least, when Ted Cruz goes on Tucker Carlson and makes that connection, tries to draw in the potential Iranian threat and recent failed assassinations, they lose that argument or suggestion or innuendo. Okay. When it comes to Barnes' tweet about Epstein's ties to Israel, Mossad, potentially, Oh, first of all, Barnes is a big boy. He picks his own fights and he makes his own tweets and he tweets what he thinks is appropriate, responsible, and reasonable. And if I disagree with it, I've disagreed with Barnes a couple times. The reality is that Barnes has been pretty much on point on a lot of things, well ahead of the curve on some of the most consequential things. But one thing I do not take kindly to is being Jew-shamed by other people who claim to be Jews. I don't know if this person's Jewish whatsoever, into being browbeaten through Jew shaming into changing what I sincerely believe and what I can demonstrably, not prove definitively, but at least build the arguments for, throw out those dots. And if you blame me for connecting them, then we just have different judgment. I don't mean to put the person on blast, but I just love the idea that, do you even understand that you are Jewish and what he said is fucking vile? God help you. First of all, don't use the Lord's name in vain. If you purport to be Jewish, you might want to at least put a dash in there. Or just, not use the Lord's name when trying to shame someone on Twitter. If it came down to it, they would load you on the rail car right next to me. Get that straight in your head, Aviva. And I have absolutely no doubt they would. Do you think that means that I'm going to, therefore, based on that tribalist, extremist, doomsday scenario, suppress any of my criticism, suppress any of my good, common, logical, good sense, and change my beliefs because of that element of tribalism? I love it when people try to Jew shame me. Independent critical thought, absent of tribalism, is a foreign concept to some people. Also, if you're unaware of the arguments for Epstein-Maxwell extortion operation and its likely ties to international intelligence, including Israeli intelligence, you are woefully ignorant. I am not going to do the Whitney Webb 2 volumes, One Nation Under Blackmail, nor am I going to get into the mistakes that she might have made in there, some of the dots that she connects that I think might be a little extraneous, just to back it up to the bare bones of this. We know that Epstein was running an extortion, blackmail, sex operation ring. I mean, if we disagree on that, okay, fine. Then he was just trafficking minors to prominent people and having weird stuff on his pedophile island, Lolita Express, after the Russian book Lolita of an old man who falls in love with a young girl, or vice versa, I forget which. We'll disagree. We agree to disagree on that. Most rational people who are semi-educated and not fully lobotomized agree that Epstein was running something of a blackmail extortion ring. Okay. He was working with Ghislaine Maxwell, who is also now serving 20 years for trafficking, but apparently to nobody, because nobody else, no clients, no one else has been charged, indicted, convicted, or jailed as a result of their sex trafficking operation. It's an anomaly. Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Robert Maxwell. He was I would say, a known intelligence asset, or at least a man who, on the one hand, died under very bizarre circumstances, who was, at the time of his life and death, suspected of being an intelligence asset. Now, I have to go back and find an article from 1991 that I know that I put on archive just in case. Here we go, people. It's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to suggest that Epstein might have some ties to Mossad. This is from the Washington Post, 1991. Israel gives Maxwell, this is Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. The boat that he died on was named after Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell went on to work with Jeffrey Epstein, doing whatever the hell they did. Some people suggest that Ghislaine Maxwell was actually the mastermind, and the other guy there, Jeffrey Epstein, was actually the one who was blackmailed into doing this as well. Israel gives Maxwell farewell fit for hero. Jerusalem, November 10. Publisher Robert Maxwell today was given a funeral befitting a national hero by Israel, the country with which he developed an intimate and sometimes controversial relationship in the last 3 years of his life. Maxwell, whose body was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean off the Canary Islands last Tuesday after he disappeared from his yacht, was buried late afternoon at the prestigious hotspot, yada, 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 yada. His funeral service in Jerusalem's Hall was attended by a host of Israeli politicians led by Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir and President Chaim Herzog, who eulogized the self-made tycoon as a man cast in a heroic mold. Born into an Orthodox... Okay, hold on a second. Only a week before his death, the volatile owner of the New York Daily News and Britain's Mirror newspaper group became involved in an exchange of lawsuits with author Seymour Hersh, who accused Maxwell of working with Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. Maxwell's death at sea only intensified the speculation in London, where Hersh promised to produce further revelations of the 68-year-old publisher's clandestine Israel connections. So far, the evidence has not been forthcoming, and senior Israeli officials, as well as sources in Britain, have disputed Hersh's account that Maxwell helped the Mossad find Mordechai Vanunu, The Israeli nuclear technician who was abducted by the spy agency in 1986 after his leaked secrets about Israel's nuclear weapons program to the Sunday Times in a newspaper. I'll give everybody the link. But call me whatever effing names you want, you intellectual cowards, if you don't know the basic principles, the basic dots upon which people begin connecting. You're an ignorant buffoon, and your accusations are fitting of an ignorant buffoon. That's Robert Maxwell. That has nothing to do with Ghislaine Maxwell. That has nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, all right. Is this close enough to establish a potential basis to believe that Epstein might have been involved with Israeli intelligence? Ehud Barak, who was the former prime minister of Israel, met with Jeffrey Epstein dozens of times, flew on private plane, report from the Times of Israel. Former prime minister visited disgraced financier and child abuser about 30 times in 2013 to 2017. This is after he's a known child abuser. Now, I can hear you stupid jackasses out there. There's pictures of him with Donald Trump. Trump wrote a picture. How many times did Trump interact with Epstein after it was known that he was a child sexual predator? How many? Post it in the links. And by the way, if it's multiple times, I'm not saying it glibly or facetiously. I'd like to know. I will reassess. How many pictures are there of Donald Trump with Epstein after it was known that he was a solicitor of child prostitution? I think it's a big fat bagel, if I can play on a pun there. I think it's a big fat bagel. Ehud Barak meets with him 30 times after it's known, meeting with him in Central Park, including 2014 in a private flight in Florida. Former President Ehud Barak met with the late disgraced financier and child abuser Jeffrey Epstein dozens of times, beginning in 2013. Barak was among a list of Jewish names. He's not a Jewish name, you stupid jackasses. He's a foreign politician. I don't care that he's Jewish. If that were Bill Clinton, I would be just as interested, not because it's a Jewish name, because it's a prominent ex-politician of one of America's allies, one of the most powerful intelligence agencies on earth. I don't care that it's a Jewish name. I care that it's a former politician's name. Including pioneering linguist Noam Chomsky, longtime Leon Bornstein, Woody Allen. Don't care about any of these as much as I care about the former prime minister, Ehud Barak. Yada, yada, yada. Epstein met with thousands of people over his career. Okay, that's cool. According to the Wall Street Journal, Wednesday's report on the calendar, Barak visited Epstein about 30 times between 2013 and 2017 at his estates in Florida and New York, including a time in 2014 when the former Israeli premier flew with Epstein on his private aircraft from Palm Beach to Tampa. I wouldn't put much stock in that either. After which Epstein went to New York. Barak said his wife and Israeli security guard were also on the flight. He said he flew with Epstein on his private plans on one other occasion, also with his wife. According to the report, Barak also met with Epstein monthly for nearly a year beginning 2015. The meetings came well after Epstein's 2008-2009 conviction and sentencing for procuring a child for prostitution, but Barak has maintained that he had no knowledge of Epstein's activities. Do you know what I say to that? Bullshit with the hardest T on earth. Bullshit. The former prime minister of Israel, the former president of any country with intelligence security detail is not going to know, maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's mean of me, is not going to know that Jeffrey Epstein had been pleaded guilty to child prostitution or soliciting of prostitution from a minor. Bullshit. And if you disagree with me, fine. But if you don't know these basic facts and you call anyone who says there must be a connection between Epstein and Israeli intelligence, call that anti-Semitic, you're an ignorant buffoon, and you cloak yourself in the shield, which you use as both a shield and a sword of sorts, to put your fingers in your ears and not understand basic facts. Was he probably connected to all intelligence, British, CIA? We know as a matter of fact that he was being used as an asset intelligence for the FBI. We know this for a fact. You can Google that as well if you want to go down this rabbit hole. But to sit there and pretend that it's anti-Semitic of Barnes, to theorize and connect those dots as he does, is pure stupidity, pure ignorance, and I would say pure obtuseness, if it's not a word like outrageous with a Y in it. So that's that. But now the underlying issue as to why we're getting into all of this it goes back to Iran. And it seems that the update on the American intervention potential is on the cooler for 2 weeks. Now, I do also say, Donald Trump, I played the clip yesterday, says, or at least Jack Posobiec reporting, it's out there that Trump says, look, we're going to wait 2 weeks to see what Iran does or what happens before we make a decision. Do I expect Trump or the administration to actually wait 2 weeks? No, and not out of an accusation of any malice. You don't publicly disclose your private plan of action. In fact, we know that Trump says, I'm not telling you what I'm doing. He said it on Rogan. Like, you don't show your cards when you're playing Texas no hold'em. You might suggest you have pocket aces, and that may or may not be true. And that's why you never trust what a poker player says when you're playing poker. They're playing poker. Trump is now saying, we're going to wait 2 weeks and we'll reassess. We'll put on a cooler and we'll decide. Whether or not he does, it's time will tell. I don't necessarily believe it, not in a negative sense, but it would be kind of silly to publicly commit to a strategy and then let Iran know they've got 2 weeks before America potentially strikes. Okay, fine. But that's the public announcement. Now, I did put out a poll that may or may not have been skewed by the replies. Actually, I should probably bring up the poll because I want to see what the results are at right now. Some would argue that Trump cooling things off, putting it in the back burner for 2 weeks, may or may not have listened, or not listened to, but absorbed, digested, internalized, and then maybe incorporated into policy what many perceive to be the backlash of, call it the populist base of the MAGA movement. Everyone is now accusing everyone of not being real MAGA. If you support war, you're not real MAGA. If you don't support war with Iran, you're not real MAGA. If you support war with Iran, you're a paid Mossad shill. If you don't support war with Iran, you're a paid Qatar shill. I don't like any of this. I think it's all stupid. I mean, unless you're dealing with like the Harry J. Sissons of the right, if you're dealing with the Krasensteins of the right, if you're dealing with people who you know get paid to post, who get paid to take an opinion, these accusations make a little more sense. But by and large, it's just a cheap way of avoiding the discussion, as cheap as accusing anyone who says there might be ties between Epstein and Mossad as being anti-Semitic. It's a cheap intellectual cop-out, and you should avoid doing it. I put out a poll just asking a relatively straightforward question. Did the populist pushback to the prospect of American intervention in Iran have any impact on Trump's decision mailing? That might explain why nobody got... Gosh darn it. One day. On his decision-making this week, do we see the results? Oh, we can't see the results. The results are 65-35. No, it had no impact. Yes, it had an impact. I'll give everybody the link. You can go falsify it with results one way or the other. So, let me make sure. Was it 65-35? I think it was. 65, it's 34.1. Yes, he heard. 65.9. No, he didn't hear. And what I love are the ad hominem replies like, the clickbaiters think that anybody cares about what they have to say. First of all, by populist base, I'm not talking about myself because I haven't taken a position and some people are calling me a fence-sitting coward for it, but I legit understand when I don't have a full enough knowledge of the intricacies of the discussion to take a full-throated position one way or the other. The discussion I had on Wednesday with the Alexes from the Duran, I found it very useful. It didn't actually convince me that intervention was outright wrong or as wrong as some people are saying. And some of their explanations for why intervention is wrong didn't ring entirely reasonable with me. You know, the idea that Iran is enriching uranium to 60% as a negotiation tactic, albeit a dumb one. Well, negotiate dumb, invite intervention from people who don't think you should be enriching uranium to 60%. For the people who say, I have no problem with Iran having a nuclear weapon, if they did, it would deter Israeli aggression, we'll just agree to disagree on that. So I wasn't talking about me at the populist base. I was specifically talking about Alex Jones, InfoWars, Steve Bannon, people who arguably, but not arguably, played a critical, decisive role in Donald John Trump getting elected. And whether or not when the Alex Joneses of the world, when the Steve Bannons of the world, I think Jack Posobiec to some extent as well, Owen Schroyer, Benny Johnson, when the populist base come out and say, we're not down with this and this is going, we don't like this and this is not what we wanted from an election, what we wanted from you. And then you have people saying, shut up, sit down, let him cook. I just wanted to know if people thought that if that had an impact, and some people said, no, it didn't. I think it did. I thought it did from the get-go because we know that Trump reads his truth posts. We know that he looks at the feed and the feedback. We know that J.D. Vance was on Twitter interacting with, addressing the concerns of the populist base. And I'm not, first of all, I'm not picking on any replies in particular. I enjoy the discussion, and I hope to have Laura Loomer on next week to discuss this. Laura tweets back, no, as into the answer. Donald Trump never said he was going to war with Iran. He said Iran can't have a nuke. So many of these podcasters think they're God's gift to the world, and their rants actually influence Trump. Trump never said he wanted war with Iran. What has changed aside from attention-starved podcasters who want to feel accomplished? None of these liars want to admit they pushed a lie that Trump was going to war. They all lied and said it wasn't his policy to not allow. They all lied and said it wasn't his policy to not allow Iran to have a nuke. I want to have this discussion viva voce with Laura because the question was not, no one ever suggested going to war with. What I said, the question was military intervention. And I will argue that it's splitting hairs to say a military strike is not going to war with. That's like Joe Biden saying, well, I said a little incursion from Russia, but not a full-blown invasion. If you say Russia can have a little incursion, you don't get to then say, well, I didn't mean that much of an incursion. And when you say going to war with, well, you don't get to say it's not war. We're just military interventioning, striking facilities, whatever. That's basically going to war with, but military intervention. The ones where it gets a little more interesting. Do I have this one up here? Is where here, this one right here. This was in response to Brandon Dilley from Warlord Dilley, fearless leader of the Dilley meme team. He says, only a fucking idiot would think that X posts impacted anything President Trump is doing at all. First of all, and again, not X posts. Populist pushback was across all platforms. Alex Jones radio show, Steve Bannon radio show. And then the idea is, well, it doesn't reach as many people as Fox News, who's pushing this war. Not the best position to be adhering to. And I will remain, I said, like I say, infighting for infighting. And I'm not trying to be an asshole. I want to actually highlight why the Brendan Dilley attitude is probably a wrong attitude. As a pure matter of fact, I say to Dilley, I think you're wrong. We know that he follows the street, yada, yada. Okay, fine. This is the big point. Assuming he's right, Trump didn't listen to the populist base at all. Publicly disparaging and disregarding the populist voices that arguably, but not arguably, got Trump elected in the first place, Alex Jones, Steve Bannon, when they disagree with Trump, is not the own you think it is. It's actually the exact same type of tribalism we see and decry on the other side of the political spectrum. Disagreement is not the division. Dismissing and disparaging the disagreement as clickbait panicins is. Food for thought, respectfully submitted. I mean, when you have the Steve Bannons of the world voice, and by the way, Steve Bannon was at the White House, so I do think that Trump listened, he heard, and whether or not he fully incorporates, that's not listening. Being heard is not a question of, let me rephrase this. The evidence of being heard is not doing what they said. You could have been heard and ultimately disregarded the advice. That's different than not being heard or being disregarded a priori. Now I wanted to play this here. Here, this is what I want to play.
China's trying to come in. The same crew, Levin, Hannity, Cruz, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham's over there for the assault. The same exact crew with the blood on their hands of 2 million. Let me be blunt. 2 million Ukrainians and Russians. 1 million Russians,
Christians,
dead or wounded. A million Ukrainians dead and wounded. And here's the point. On this show, as you know, from the very beginning, with talking about Professor Mersheimer, they were leading the Ukrainians into a destructive war. It's like World War I. The catastrophic nature of that conflict is revolting.
But this one's different. This time they got it right. It's going to be the argument. Don't compare it to Iraq because it's not Iraq now. This time we know that Iran is on the verge of a. It's different. It's different. So we can never learn from the rhyming nature of history. Recent history with respect to Russia and Ukraine. The amazing thing is if you apply the same rationale to Russia and Ukraine, it's their war. We don't need to be involved. We don't need to be financing it. Nobody ever accuses you of being anti-Ukrainian, or maybe they do. But you adopt that same strategy that many on the right adopted vis-a-vis the Ukraine-Russia war. Let them fight it out. We don't need to put boots on the ground, and we don't need to bankrupt our country to fight this proxy war. All of a sudden, they changed the tune here because they found a way to say, no, Iran is not Russia, and Iran is not Russia. The only question is, politically, strategically, historically, does this rhyme enough that you should take a step back, take a deep breath, and reassess.
Who cheerleaded that, and where are they now? Are they cheerleading it? No, because they understand the American people are it's revolting.
They want a new proxy
what's
war
happening.
before they even finish the last one.
Exactly. It's revolting.
And the one man,
the
the
way
one
they
man
do-
on Fox News who wasn't cheerleading it, they fired him.
got rid of him.
Do the people who think they know better think they get to now disregard Steve Bannon, who spent 4 months in jail serving Donald Trump? Jack Posobiec? Alex Jones? Owen Schroyer? Do you think now they get to just disregard it and suggest that they're clickbait attention seekers? Holy hell. The disagreement is not the division. The disparagement of the disagreement is the division. Write that down. Oh, do I have anything else on this? I think I did. I didn't even want to talk about this because I don't like this discussion. It is fundamentally divisive. But I do think that the disagreement, as public as it's going to be, you call everyone who disagrees clickbait, attention-seeking, whatever, who think that they want to be... No, has it occurred to you that the reason why Alex Jones, Steve Bannon, Owen Schroyer have gotten popular is because they speak truth? And that you think now you get to come in and say, shut up, sit down, like you're Senator Hirono? I mean, what do we say when Senator Hirono tells man to shut up and sit down? This doesn't concern you. Oh, shut up and sit down, Bannon. Hey, Al, shut up and sit down, Populists. You voted for Trump, let him cook. That doesn't mean let him cook without the feedback. And my analogy also is let him cook. We'll give him some additional ingredients with which to cook. The insight, the opinions, the facts, and the sentiment of the populist base that got him there in the kitchen in the first place. And I luckily believe and understand, and I think I do know with relative certainty, that Donald Trump doesn't espouse the hardline views of the people online telling the others to shut up and sit down. He does listen, and he does incorporate it. He does follow his truth feed, and he does hear the voices of the people that put him in the position that he is in right now to change the world for the better, which he seems to be doing, which is why everybody wants to make sure that he doesn't make one big, bad, stupid mistake that drags America into the last 4 years of Ukraine, into the last 20 years of Iraq. Say, boss, that's that.